Tears of the Kingdom does a lot right. Actually, pretty much everything right. But one thing the game failed the most at was giving the player good rewards for the dungeons. I am of course talking about the sages. The sage abilities serve as a replacement for the champion's abilities in Breath of the Wild, and getting a breath of fresh air with new abilities isn't a bad idea. But the small problem with this is that replacing the champion's abilities with the sages was the worst mistake Nintendo made with the entire game. None of these sage abilities can make up for their champion counterparts. Yeah, Tulin's ability is pretty good, but I would still argue Revali's Gale was better. So on that, we might as well talk about Tulin's ability first, since it's the first one you usually unlock. Tulin's ability isn't bad, it's not spectacular, but it does succeed in being a useful quality of life feature. Instead of sending you in the air like Revali's Gale, it pushes you forward in the air, which is also pretty useful. This ability becomes so natural that it feels like an integral part of the game. I replayed Breath of the Wild a few weeks ago and kept pressing A while flying because I thought that I had Tulin's ability. It's also the only ability that can be used without interacting with the avatar directly. All you have to do is press A while in the air and the ability works for you. The only time you have to walk up to him and press A is if you're on the ground, which doesn't really matter since Tulin's ability is almost always used in the air. But we can't just talk about the abilities on their own. We also have to consider if the sages are actually good characters, because just like Breath of the Wild, they're also pretty important to the story, in which case Tulin is almost the best. You could certainly argue that Tulin is the best sage in terms of personality, but I think Sidon is a little bit better, which we'll talk about later. Tulin's personality for the most part is that he's a young and brave kid, and that's pretty much it. My only question is why they would choose some confident kid to be Link's sidekick instead of Teba. Riju, Unibo, Teba, and Sidon all held with their respective regions' divine beasts, but for some reason all of those other people get to come back as a sage while Teba gets replaced by some random kid. It's like choosing Luke Skywalker over Darth Vader. It's a completely unreasonable take that nobody would agree with. All in all, Tulin's ability is actually pretty good and makes a fair enough replacement for Revali's Gale. Get ready though, because it's all downhill from here. The next sage ability is Sidon's, and I hate to say it, but this might be the worst ability in the entire game. Getting a free shield as one of your abilities is completely uninspired, but if it was left at that, I wouldn't take much of an issue with this ability. But the shield for this ability disappears after you press the attack button. So what's the point of the shield? Nintendo really expects most people to chase Sidon down and run in circles just to get a shield that disappears after attacking once? I guess it's fair to point out that this ability also allows you to shoot water, but tell me how many times is that actually going to be worth using? The good news is that, as I mentioned before, Sidon is a great character in this game, even if his ability isn't good. For a while, I wasn't a big fan of Sidon or his character, but I just want to point out that Sidon canonically went around telling people that Link was his best friend while he was gone. Now, is anything else Sidon does funny? No, but Sidon is hardly an unlikable character. He's someone who you either like a little or like a lot. Characters who are positive but not arrogant are usually pretty hard to hate, and Sidon is one of those characters. But even if Sidon is a cool character, his sage ability is terrible, especially when you compare it to Mipha's Grace, which was basically a second life. The next ability is Unibo's bomb ability. And I will say, not having to break a million weapons in order to break through a lot of rocks is a nice quality of life change. But obviously, being able to break through rocks easier isn't enough to be one of the 5 major abilities in this game, right? Well, you can actually use Unibo's ability and shoot him at monsters, dealing damage to them. Based on what I've observed, I would guess that this bomb deals up to 10 damage. This is super useful, since many people who play the game might forget to press Y to attack and deal far more damage than Yunobo's ability. Attacking with Y is a pretty niche technique, so I'm glad they added a solution which made it more easy for casual players like myself. Seriously though, if they wanted Yunobo's ability to do more than break a few rocks, they could have made it do a little more damage. The damage it does is so menial that it's not worth using anyways, especially by the time you get it, when you probably have much stronger weapons. So in reality, all you get is the ability to break rocks, which you could already do. The sad part is that as bad as this sounds, it's still more useful and applicable than Sidon's ability. So sure, his ability might suck, but what about Yunobo as a character? Well, it's actually a lot worse. Yunobo is the worst character in this entire game. Even if we don't compare him to the likes of the best character, Daruk, Yunobo somehow makes the likes of Master Koga look like writing genius. Even though he's a Goron, he's so lame and cowardly. The way he talks is like that of a generic surfer dude in a TV show.
I am the Sage of Fire! I've got an awesome new power, Goro! Now stop flapping your rock chompers and get over here, Goro!
He really is the opposite of what a character should be like, especially a Goron, let alone the Goron leader. The fourth ability is Riju's Lightning Bow ability. This one is the most boring of the 5 because what it does is give you a free lightning strike wherever you shoot it. That's it. It's honestly weird how it seems like they were trying to change things up so much, but then gave us a less interesting ability than anything in Breath of the Wild. This ability actually makes less sense in this game, since you can get arrows with lightning properties a lot easier now, essentially making the ability useless unless you have no electric items in your inventory. Likewise, Riju is the most boring champion out of them all. She isn't as unlikable as Yunobo, which I guess is a good thing, but that's mostly because she's so uninteresting that there's no reason to like her, or dislike her, I guess. I don't want to leave it there, but that's pretty much all there is to Riju and her Sage ability. So, that's 4 of the abilities. But instead of doing 4 like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom has 5 abilities, with the last one being Minoru. Minoru is a weird case. She's really terrible in some ways, but in other ways, she's a lot cooler than the other sages. Being able to ride Minoru is awesome. Attaching items to her hands to attack monsters with is also brilliant. But Nintendo hates happy moments, so they decided it would be in their best interest to make her run out of energy if she walked for more than 30 seconds. Having a cap on how long Minoru can walk without getting tired in the first place is a terrible idea, but making it as short as it is only makes it that much worse. And when you aren't riding Minoru, she actually hurts you more than she helps you. Riding her is the only thing you can do. When you aren't riding Minoru, all she does is put up this massive shield, which doesn't help at all. At least Sidon attacks with a spear, Riju attacks with her weapon, Tulin uses a bow, and Yunobo uses his weapon. As a character, Minoru is also super boring. She's meant to be important to the story, but characters like Rauru or even Sonia are more interesting. We can give more charity to Minoru, since she wasn't serving as a replacement for anything else, but all the other 4 were serving as obvious replacements for the champion's abilities in Breath of the Wild, and none of them lived up to it. Tulin's ability is actually acceptable, but all the other 3 were disappointing for me. With the 4 main locations, I was excited to see what new abilities there would be, and I was let down every time. Yes, there's a bias because of how awesome those abilities were in the previous game, but even if we don't compare them, Tears of the Kingdom's Sage abilities on their own are alright at best.